Welcome to Back to the Bible. I'm Pastor Nat Crawford, and today we're continuing our look at family done God's way. This is our focus for the month of June, and today we'll see that while marriage is a beautiful covenant established by God Himself, there are some pitfalls that can trip you up, so we're going to go over those dangers to help you be in the know. Now, before we begin, let me encourage you to call and request your copy of Moving Forward, our new 3-month daily devotional. We'd like to send it to you as a thank you for your gift today. And right now, we're blessed by a group of friends who have offered a $127,000 challenge grant to help us meet our fiscal year-end needs. So please give generously today, knowing that your gift will go twice as far paired with this timely challenge grant. Call 1-800-759-2425. That's 1-800-759-2425. Or, if you prefer to give online, visit us at backtothebible.org. Now, here's today's study. Yesterday, we began to talk about the topic of marriage. We came to realize that marriage matters to God, but we also recognize that we have a lot of confusion about marriage, sex, and parenting. We've got a lot of confusion about family. The reality is marriage and its importance is decreasing. More people are cohabitating than before, and fewer people are getting married. The problem is that Christians aren't bucking the trends. We are not at the same levels as non-believers, that's true, but we are still gravitating farther away from a Christian view of marriage. That's why yesterday we tackled the topic of why marriage. We covered that topic, and suffice it to say, there were surprising reasons, like it displays God's image. It's there to refine us. And one of the biggest disappointments couples need to hear is that marriage isn't there to make you happy. It's there to make you holy. And because of that very reason, marriage comes with some major dangers. There are pitfalls of marriage, and if you're not wise, you can fall into these pitfalls and seriously injure yourself, your spouse, your family, your whole marriage. So let's look at these dangers to marriage. The first danger to marriage is selfishness. Selfishness is a killer of marriage. You see, marriage is not about you. Marriage is not meant to make you happy or to make all your dreams come true. It's not meant for you to meet your soulmate. It's not about finding someone to become your servant or to flatter you. Marriage is all about refining you. It's really about sanctification. Well, what's sanctification? Sanctification is the process of making you more and more like Christ. This goes against what we're told from the culture. This goes against our natural tendency. You see, we're told by the media today, by YouTube, by the TV shows, by mainstream magazines, that if you're not getting your needs met, you ditch the loser. I hate to be so blunt, but that's what they're telling us today. If your spouse doesn't fulfill you or make you happy, find the one that does. It is completely selfish and it is totally ungodly. But in some ways, we unintentionally set ourselves up for failure. Here's what I mean. I remember when my wife and I were dating. I wanted to really impress her, so what did I do? Well, I knew she liked the arts. We actually both love the arts. We love musicals, we love theater. So I called her up one day and I said, "Babe, I'm going to take you out." She goes, "Oh yeah?" I said, "Oh yeah, we're going to get dressed up." She said, "Keep going, it's sounding good." I said, "You and I, we're going to go out to a nice dinner, and then we're going to go to a show. Look, I got us tickets." And she goes, "Oh, I'm getting excited. Let me guess. Phantom of the Opera?" "Nope." "Is it Les Mis?" "No." "Cats?" "No, it's not even Cats." "Well, what is it?" she asked. And that's when I let her have it. I got us tickets to WWE. That's right, professional wrestling live and in person. And what was her response? "Oh, wow." And guess what? She actually went with me. She was on national TV holding up signs and having a good time. Or So I thought. She actually hated it. She went through with it. Why? Because she was infatuated with me, and so because of that, she was happy to go. I mean, heck, I went to the ballet and pretended like I liked it. And as you see, that's what we do when we're dating. We constantly think of the other person. You do the things you never would do, but you're in love. So you kind of turn off that selfish mode, and then, well, you know the rest. You get married. I can't tell you how many times I heard in counseling sessions, "She tricked me. She is not the girl I dated." Or I'd hear, "No, you don't understand this guy. He lied to me. He is not the person that I dated." Well, the spouse may have been right, but you were actually avoiding the danger zone by thinking of the other person. That's what was happening. Unfortunately, we default to our sinful nature and begin to think of ourselves more and more. You see, that's the first danger to marriage. It's selfishness. Now, there are more dangers to marriage, and the second danger to marriage is culture. Now, I touched on this briefly a little bit earlier, but I'm going to talk about it more. Relationships, according to the culture, are what we call performance-based relationships. They're not grace-based. They're not mercy-driven. They're not based on unconditional love or unconditional respect. No, according to the world, it is all about keeping score. It's all about doing so you can receive. In preparing for this message, I typed into Google, "what to do if you're unhappy in marriage," and I found all sorts of crazy suggestions. Here's just a few pieces of advice that I read online. One person said, "Look, not all marriages are meant to be forever, and you know what? That's okay." Another article began with, "If you're in a bad marriage, don't try to mend it, end it." Are you seeing the theme there? Look, I found articles on when it's time to cheat on your spouse. I found all sorts of crazy pieces of advice when it comes to being unhappy in marriage. If I could consolidate all the words of advice, it would be this: get even and then get out. That's what the world offers us today. If you're unhappy in marriage, get even and then get out. But you and I know as believers, this goes against the Word of God. 1 Corinthians 13:4 says, "Love is patient. Love is kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. Love doesn't resent. In other words, it forgives often and freely, just like God forgives us." But again, the culture says, forget that. If you get hurt, give hurt. If you feel pain, give pain. If you're unhappy, then they should be unhappy too. A performance-based relationship is ungodly, and frankly, it's unlivable. That's why culture is the second danger to marriage. The third danger to marriage is your past. Now, here's what I mean by your past. Because you may be thinking, hey, wait, I've lived a good life. I mean, yeah, sure, it's not perfect, but it's not like I have a negative past. If that's you listening today and you're saying that I don't have that kind of negative past, I say awesome. What I'm talking about here is your spoken and unspoken expectations that come from your past, from your childhood, your upbringing, and your life up to the point of marriage. That's what I mean about your past. Things that you bring to your marriage are like values, religion, maybe even denomination. Things you bring from your past into marriage are your finances, maybe family dynamics, holidays, former relationships, finances, and just all your experiences of life. All of these and more make up your past. I mean, consider this. My wife and I came from two very different backgrounds. I come from a divorced family. My wife comes from an intact family. I was an only child. My wife, she has siblings. My family thrived on conflict and confrontation. My wife's family tends to avoid conflict. Holidays for my family meant high conflict and really quick exits. My wife's family finds value in spending a lot of time together, in fact, every waking moment together. You can see the issues. We both have very different families who value different things. So how do you sort out what's going to be the values, the family dynamics, what holidays will look like, all those factors when it comes to your own family? Don't fool yourself and think that this won't be an issue. I remember doing premarital counseling for a couple who had very different financial backgrounds. One person came from a family of savers who were very conservative in their spending and lifestyle. The other came from spenders who lived on credit. You can imagine the kind of fights that would come down the road. Spenders and savers. So we all bring our past into our relationships, and this needs to be discussed. It needs to be worked through, and it needs to be compromised on for your future. So we've covered 3 dangers to our marriages: selfishness, the cultures we live in, and the past. I'll be back with one more important consideration in just a moment. When COVID-19 hit, Back to the Bible moved quickly, offering our latest technology at no charge to help churches move into the digital world and stay in touch with their members. We've been here every day of the year bringing you encouragement directly from God's Word. And through our app, we send minute-by-minute reminders of God's promises to individuals throughout the world. All said, the ministry opportunities during this challenging time have been tremendous, but there is still much to do. So today, we're asking you to prayerfully take up the challenge and offer a special fiscal year-end gift. Maybe this is your first gift ever, or perhaps you gave a year ago but haven't thought about it since. Well, now is the time, because your gift today will go twice as far when paired with our generous challenge grant. To show our thanks, we'll send you a copy of Moving Forward, our new daily devotional. Moving Forward will take you through the summer with daily insights and Bible verses to help you move forward in faith. Request your copy when you give at 1-800-759-2425. That's 1-800-759-2425. Or, if you prefer to give online, visit backtothebible.org. That's backtothebible.org. All right, here's more of today's message. So selfishness, the culture we live in, and the past. These are 3 possible dangers for your marriage. But there's one more. The 4th danger to your marriage is the future. There is so much that lies ahead for couples. But have they begun to talk about these things? Have they begun to think about these things? Have they begun to think about the roles that they can and will be fulfilled in marriage? Do both spouses plan to be career-oriented? Or does one intend to stay home with the children? Now, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but what do you do when a spouse really wants to be a stay-at-home mom, when they've built up a career and now they feel stuck because they can't stay home? This happens all the time. What about the topic of children? I was amazed in counseling how many couples never talked about having kids until they were a couple of years into marriage, when one spouse declares, "I never really wanted to have kids." What happens when one person doesn't want to have kids and the other wants to have 5 kids, 10 kids, an unlimited amount of kids? I mean, I think about my own marriage. When we got married, we originally said we wanted 5, but then in time, I said I wanted 1, and she still wanted, 4 or 5. It meant compromise and talking about these things. What about maintaining the home? Does one spouse expect the other to cook and to clean exclusively? Or does it seem appropriate to split the duties based on differing factors? This is a big one. Well, what about love languages? In Dr. Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages, he identifies 5 primary ways that individuals can prefer to receive and give love. The 5 love languages are gifts, that is, giving gifts of various kinds. There's acts of service, such as maybe cooking a meal, fixing a car, sweeping the floors. A third is quality time, such as focused time with your spouse, where no other people and no other distractions exist. There's words of affirmation, such as a note or a voiced observation and appreciation. And last is physical touch, such as hugging, cuddling, things like that. The kicker of these love languages is that often how you prefer to receive love is often different than how your spouse desires to receive it as well. I remember early in my marriage, I would cook and clean the house. I would iron clothes. But my wife would come up and give me a kiss and a hug, and I thought, well, that's weird. Why doesn't she just sweep and vacuum or cook a meal? That would mean a lot. Well, she would suggest, why don't we go out for a date? So what would I do? I'd invite friends over to our house, and she'd say, Nat, what's your problem? I just want to be with you. And my argument was, you will be with me and with 10 of our closest friends. I mean, you can see the problem. We were both emptying our love tanks and not getting them refilled. This was a major hazard in our marriage. It was a danger until we realized each other's love language and began to speak to them. Other areas that involved our future and/or desires are sex and planning for the future. So that's 4 dangers, and the last one I want to point out is handling problems. I cannot tell you how many premarital counseling sessions I did when I'd ask the couples, is there anything that would cause you to dislike your spouse? You know what I'm going to say next. They would look into each other's eyes, and they'd go into that weird place where they were kind of floating in their seats, and they would look at each other and they'd just say, no. They had rose-colored glasses on. They didn't believe that things could possibly get worse, that they would experience those wedding vows, right? The worse, the poorer, the sickness. To them, it would all just be better and richer and good health. They had rose-colored glasses on, and all they could see was their spouse and the good times ahead. So many couples ignore the warnings that there are dangers in marriage. They do not anticipate the trials of life. James 1 says, when you experience trials of many kinds, not if, but when you experience trials. And yes, this wasn't for a marriage in particular, but it is a principle that applies to every area of life. We will experience trials. So here's the truth. Challenges and trials do not mean your marriage is broken. Listen to me. If you're going through a hard time right now in your marriage, that does not mean your marriage is broken. What it means is that real life is happening, and you too, as a couple, need to rely on God to get you through it. You see, your response to the trials and the difficulties will either drive you apart, or they will make you an unbreakable team. Remember, Genesis 2:18 says, Then the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him. You see, God did not intend for you to do life alone if you're married. He gave you a helper to get you through it, together. But the real ticket to overcoming hurdles is to not just do it as a twosome, but instead as a holy threesome. Ecclesiastes 4:12 says, And though a man might prevail against one who is alone, 2 will withstand him, and a threefold cord is not quickly broken. Friends, I can't tell you how many couples have faced adversity and trials alone. That is, as an individual. And you know what? They struggle. They struggle. It's a constant battle. I've seen couples who have faced opposition by means of health battles, financial crisis, or something else, but they did it apart from Christ, and the relationship failed. Marriage, listen to me, marriage is a partnership between husband and wife and the maker and sustainer of marriage, God. You cannot do it alone. You weren't supposed to do it alone. You must do it in a partnership with God. Will it be easy? Hardly. Will there be dangers? Commonly, yes. But is it worth it? Absolutely. Is it possible? Yes, but only with God. Let me turn now to my discussion partners, Arnie Cole and Cara Whitney. Arnie, you and your wife, Shar, have been through a lot of challenges. I would say really tough challenges. How did those challenges affect your marriage?
I can say without fail, all of the challenges that we have been through have drawn us closer together and made us really in step, not only with each other, but with the Lord. I'm going to say this word. I know it's not a word, but it's my favorite word, irregardless of what other people told us or the advice we got. You know, there's a lot of people that really want to help, and give you advice when you're going through these things. But staying focused on each other and staying focused on the Lord really brought us through everything so that we're quite strong and best of friends.
I want to ask you a follow-up question because a lot of people would say, yeah, I know in order to keep this marriage going through the hard times, I need to stay focused on God. Well, how did you do that? What does that look like practically for you?
I'm a big observer, and early on going into ministry, I noticed that a lot of guys weren't very happily married that were in leadership positions in ministry, and it's almost like they gave up their marriage for their ministry, which was just kind of crazy, bizarre. And I just thought, I'm not going to be that person. I don't want to, when I get old, like I am now, ready to someday retire, to have my wife absolutely despise me because I was gone 90% of the time. So God's just totally blessed us, but I've had a lot of heads up experiences by watching other guys.
Yep, and I think that's a great piece of advice so we can learn from other people's mistakes and even their victories. Cara, I'd like to hear from you. I'd like to hear your take on the idea that our culture is a danger to marriage. How do you see this happening today?
Well, in all the ways that you had previously mentioned, Nat, our current model, if your spouse isn't satisfactory, this world encourages you to trade them in on a new model. You've got movies and books that give you an idea that you're going to live happily ever after, but it never really tells you what happens if Mr. Darcy falls off his horse and has to eat pancakes through a straw for 8 weeks. Or, he doesn't want kids, or keeps peeing on the toilet seat after you've asked him over and over again to put the seat up. So,
unheard of.
Yeah, I would say that that's probably the biggest problem is it never really tells you that there's problems and that you have to work through them together.
Right. Okay, well, how about this, though? How are you guarding your family, your marriage, against the influence of the culture? Because, I once read from Josh McDowell that, your family is one click away from an alternative worldview or a thought or philosophy. And so the point is we are inundated with influence from the culture. How are you protecting your family and your marriage from that influence?
Well, I protect my family by hanging out with my family. I hang out with my kids. I talk to them. I hang out with my husband. I make time to talk to him. And so you never have to get to know someone again if you're constantly hanging out with them, you're laughing, you have inside jokes. So that's how I protect myself from the culture and my family is when we're together. We text each other goofy pictures. Yesterday when my husband and my son were at the dentist, we started a whole text string. We like each other.
I think that's really good advice that when you are committed to your family, you will invest your time and your attention with them, even when they are around quite a bit. And by doing so, you will be guarding against the cultural influences. One last question. I think we may have talked about this a little bit, but the trials of life, we're going to experience them. They're going to happen. There are plenty of dangers to marriage. But do those trials that we experience strengthen or weaken a marriage? And how do we leverage those to strengthen our marriage instead?
Always strengthen. If you're in Jesus and you're following Jesus, always trials strengthen a marriage because trials expose your holes, and then you get the absolute privilege of fixing them together.
Arnie, what about you?
It depends on the trials. I don't want to oversimplify it because there are some trials that are just devastating to a marriage, and people do stupid things, and forgiveness is such a big thing. And focus on Jesus. But what happens, when you mess up big time? And it's just, it's so complicated. My take would be if you can focus on Jesus and how Jesus has treated you, if you can return that to the person you love, regardless of what they've done, you will get through it pretty strong.
Yeah, I think that the trials, they should strengthen us, but the reality is that they can weaken and even break a marriage. The key is to keep Christ first. And I think you alluded to it as well. There are self-inflicted trials that can tend to weaken a marriage more than the external trials that come. But regardless, whether it's an internal or an external trial, we need to keep our commitment to Christ. And when we do so, the trials can be leveraged to strengthen our marriages. Thanks for listening. We'll continue our look at family done God's way throughout the month of June. By the way, June 30th is the deadline for our fiscal year end. So, to help us meet the opportunities and challenges of the next year, we've been blessed with a $127,000 challenge grant. That means your gift today will have twice the impact. And to show our thanks, we'll send you a copy of our new 3-month devotional called Moving Forward. Filled with encouraging insights and Bible verses, Moving Forward offers daily steps to help you along your spiritual journey. So request your copy today at 1-800-759-2425. That's 1-800-759-2425. Or give online at backtothebible.org. Well, that's all for today. I'll be back tomorrow with a look at the myths of marriage. It's a very interesting study of how our culture sees marriage today and what God has to say about it. I hope you'll join me. I'm Nat Crawford for Back to the Bible, encouraging you to stand firm, stand faithful, and stand on God's Word. If today's episode has helped you move forward in faith, be sure to share it with a friend. And would you consider leaving a rating or review? We'd love to hear from you.